This is Breaking the News Plus. I'm Jana Shortal. So it's been about a week since Chief Brian O'Hara resigned his post as the chief of police in Minneapolis amidst an investigation that the mayor says he tampered with. But in the background of that is a conversation that we need to have in the city of Minneapolis and as a state. Where is the police department in terms of its state mandated agreement with something called a consent decree? And the person I want to talk to about that tonight is Minnesota Department of Human Rights Commissioner Rebecca Lucero, who joins us today. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here today.
So, as I mentioned in our introduction, it's been about a week since Brian O'Hara has left the Minneapolis Police Department, and it's given way to this conversation about where are we as a Minneapolis Police Department in terms of staying in compliance with the state consent decree.
Right. Okay. Great question. I think it might make sense to just take a quick step back and talk about where we are in the consent decree process, because we are still very much in the early stages. And I know that can be really hard to kind of wrap your head around because, let's see, we launched the investigation into the city of Minneapolis and the Minneapolis Police Department on May 29th, May 30th of 2020. And so it's been a very long time that this work has been going on. The consent decree was signed in March of 2023. So we're a few years into it at this point, but it would be correct for me to frame it up as we are very much in the foundational stages too. Where there has been movement, it is the very beginning of a lot of progress in the years ahead.
Commissioner Lucero, that's a good place to start, too, because it is hard for the general public and even myself included to get your arms around the fact that several years into the process, it's still somewhat in its infancy, which isn't unusual.
Yes.
Other cities that have been under consent decrees takes many years to get to the goals set. And so we're about average, I guess, with what other cities have done. Are there any things that you saw during Chief O'Hara's tenure that didn't go so well with the decree, or were all things followed as they should be?
Well, I just want to make sure that I'm answering that. It's not owned by Chief O'Hara. The consent decree is certainly the chief plays an incredibly important role, and it's bigger than just the chief. It's also the city, and so there are a lot of people that are moving pieces, and you'll see that the monitor talks about some good progress in the use of force policy, both putting it together and the training to move that forward, but then also talks about really big problems with the accountability systems, and those systems mirror the problems that we noted in our investigation findings, and so those continue to persist. They existed in 2020 and before that, and continue to persist today. And so certainly the accountability structures and the data systems around those are something that we are particularly concerned about and certainly come to light in moments like these.
Commissioner, let's hone in on what you all did find when you had your investigation following the killing of George Floyd by Derek Chauvin. What did you find was wrong with MPD in that initial investigation?
Sure. We found that there was we conducted a very thorough 10-year pattern of practice investigations. We looked at hours of data, hours of body camera footage. We talked to many community members and officers. We reviewed lots of police files. We did statistical analysis, and we found that across the board, the Minneapolis Police Department are engaged in a pattern of practice of race-based policing. There's a lot of details that go into that, but of course that means that they're using force disproportionately against Black and white people. They are stopping people, and there's a difference that you see based on race. For instance, even how long people are stopped, you can see that difference. And that difference, you can also see, it's been a while since I've talked about the specifics of our findings. And honestly, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about them because that is ultimately the center and reason why we are doing all of it. It's to make sure that we end race-based policing. That makes both Minneapolis safer, community members safer. It also makes officers a lot safer too. They go home more often safer, and community members do too, when they are using force appropriately, when they are escalating instead of escalating situations. All of us are better when there is quality public safety systems in place.
So that's part of what you found in those initial findings. And so how does the consent decree go about making that no longer the case, however long it takes?
Sure. I mean, I think the foundational pieces, which is where we are right now, are really grounded in changing policies, making sure that there's good policies in place, and then training on those policies in a way that is consistent, uses adult learning principles, is engaging, and so that it can be applied. So those are the real foundational pieces. But I do really want to stress that we're not going to create policies that solve every problem. And so the real hard core work comes in when you are building the culture, and the culture pieces there in the consent decree. There's a few pieces that I think are particularly important that I'll highlight. So one of them, we've already talked about it quickly, is the accountability systems. When there's really good accountability systems in place, people know how to show up better. They are getting the training and the support they need. They are getting corrected more quickly so that they are able to perform well. And officers that aren't performing well or showing up, they aren't able to control that culture. That's no longer the standard, and they can move on from being police officers for the city of Minneapolis. So then when officers are doing really well, we're not talking about accountability. That's where you're talking about making sure that they get to learn from mistakes, where they're reviewing data regularly and they're getting training to make sure they're correcting their behaviors. And that comes from a culture of continuous learning. There is a requirement in the consent decree that they have to meet, the leadership within the Minneapolis Police Department have to meet regularly, quarterly, to review a bunch of data and learn from it. And what's important about this, and what my favorite thing is, you see this around the country in what are called use of force panels. And what we did different in Minneapolis is we said, look, if you are only doing these kind of panels when force is used, this should be very seldom. The vast majority of us are interacting with police officers, and there is no force used. And those are the moments where officers can choose to escalate situations or de-escalate situations, to discriminate against somebody or not discriminate against somebody, to help somebody or ignore somebody. And so it is in all of those other moments that are really important. And so the quarterly review panels require that analysis quarterly. And those are some of the things that help lead to a different culture if they're being utilized correctly, if you have the data systems, if you are meeting, if you are creating a culture of, please share what's going on, what do we need to do differently? And that's kind of the next work that really needs big attention with this new chief in the months ahead.
Right. So when the city goes about and the city council goes about, first locating that chief, picking the right person, going through a confirmation process, I imagine it's going to be critical that that chief be pretty well versed in what is expected in that consent decree and show an understanding that there should be work done within the department so that those data points are reviewed correctly. And you kind of look at it like a report card, right? 4 times a year, like here's where we're kind of missing the mark. And so I want you to prove these spaces. Is that something that they should know on the front end before they even apply for the job or take the job?
Okay, I'm going to give you a nuanced yes and no on that. Okay. And that's because at the end of the day, success cannot be tied to the consent decree itself. If officers are only making these changes, if the city of Minneapolis are only making these changes because of a consent decree, then we're not talking about lasting culture change. And so someone doesn't necessarily need to know how to read a legal document or all the terms there, but they do need to understand the importance of having good data systems in place, having good accountability systems in place, doing the work on the ground with their team and their staff to make sure people are set up for success, showing up and setting that right tone across the board. So maybe they could benefit from some consent decree experience, but not necessarily. Again, success has to be tied to doing what's right for the people of Minneapolis and for the officers. It has to be about creating a public safety system that is free from race-based policing and is really grounded in humanity and civil rights. That really needs to be the center, not a consent decree necessarily.
Gotcha. From the beginning of this process, when it was signed back in May of 2023, did you see accountability get better within the department, or is it still stagnant in your opinion?
I think that the reports from the monitor, Alifa, demonstrate that there is a lot of work that needs to happen with accountability, that the internal affairs system is not working at all. And in fact, you will note from the monitor reports that come out that they stop reporting data for the IA from internal affairs because they say the data is so flawed and unreliable that we can't even give you numbers on where they are. That's a huge problem when you can't even look at the numbers to see, okay, where do we need to focus? What do we need to do different? And there is another report coming out by Alifa in the coming weeks ahead. And I don't anticipate that there are any numbers that community members, officers, the monitor can use to say, where do we need to improve? What's going well? So across the board, accountability systems were not where they needed to be 6 years ago. They were not where they needed to be 10 years ago, and they're still not where they need to be. There's a long way to go.
Why is that? Why are they still not where they need to be, even after all the city has been through?
That's a great question, but I do know that this is a real opportunity to make some real solid movement in the weeks ahead. The city was supposed to have, for instance, an updated discipline matrix in the first year of the consent decree evaluation period. We have now completed the first 2 years of the evaluation period. We don't have an updated discipline matrix. If we did have an updated discipline matrix, is it being followed? No. Are the investigation timelines being followed? No. And so there is a moment right here where the city can make some big changes to put these systems in place to set the next chief up for success. I think that would be good for the officers and for the next chief. And so change can always be hard, but it can also be an opportunity for some quick growth. And I would love to see that here.
Why hasn't that change happened yet, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, our 10-year pattern and practice investigation showed that it wasn't a new problem. It's a long-standing problem that's been in place. Change does take time, but it also takes really deep commitment. There's also just a whole lot that we talk about all the boats that have to rise at the same time. You need updated data systems. You need people who know how to do quality investigations. You also have to dig yourself out of the hole that you are in on all of the investigations that are at this point quite old. You just have to have that real commitment and narrow focus to it. But we need updated policies. People have to be trained on those policies and you have to hold them accountable. So when you're working on policy updates, you're maybe not putting as much time into internal affairs as you're supposed to. When you're working on, and it sort of could make sense to start with policies. And maybe that means that some of the work around accountability isn't being addressed as thoroughly. And I would really like to see that focus shift as we go into this next year.
Kind of chew gum and walk at the same time would be some advice going forward. And I've seen you describe it as it could be a reset moment that, okay, right, let's take this as an opportunity to try this again with a fresh set of eyes.
That's right.
All right. Well, yeah. Commissioner Lucero, we really appreciate your time coming on Breaking the News Plus tonight. This has been a lot of information that I know a lot of people have been yearning to hear. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate your candor.
Thank you so much, and have a great day.
You do as well. That's all for Breaking the News Plus on this Thursday night. I'll see you next time. Take care.